Hello everyone, it's Monday the 25th of June. I'm Russ McLean Chair of the Patient Voices Group, and today I've come along to the Royal Blackburn Teaching Hospital to chat with East Lancashire Hospitals Trust Chief Executive, Mr Kevin McGee. Kevin, hello.
Hello, Russ.
Now this month, East Lancashire Hospitals have begun to introduce electronic patient letters, starting with some outpatient clinics within the hospital. Patients who have a mobile phone number registered with the hospital will be offered their letter digitally. If the digital letter is not accessed within 24 hours or no mobile number is held with the hospital, then a postal letter is automatically sent and the digital letter is deleted. So the question, Mr McGee, is, has the Trust any plans to roll out this system to other areas? And has there been any work carried out to show what cost savings the Trust can expect from the strategy?
So digital technology has taken over all aspects of our life, and we need to look at digital technology, we need to look at automation, we need to look at artificial intelligence, and I do think those things are going to revolutionise healthcare for the future. It's going to make it cheaper, it's going to make it more accessible to patients. So we're just trialling digital technology now in terms of outpatients, but I'm sure it will roll out to all aspects of healthcare in the future. I haven't got any exact figures for saving, but we do know that it makes a lot of savings for us. So we have far fewer did not attends when people have access to digital technology and digital notifications. So we will still undertake paper copies where that's appropriate and where people don't have access to phones or computers, etc. But really, when we think about the future, as I say, digital technology will revolutionise how healthcare is delivered in future.
I think the one cost that perhaps springs to my mind is obviously the postal cost, because the Trust must spend a significant amount of money each year on posting out letters.
We spend tens of thousands on letters, but also letters are very inefficient. It takes time. They can also go astray. We don't know whether people have received the letters or not, so it's not really an efficient and effective way of doing it. And technology and use of digital technology and mobile phones, smartphones, etc., I do think are going to have a massive impact on how we do our business going forward.
Mr McGee, we've had a question in saying, why are patients in Pennine, Lancashire waiting longer for treatment? So some figures have shown that there is a national treatment target of 62 days following an urgent referral from a GP. Now, on average, patients at East Lancashire Hospitals Trust waited 51 days to receive their first treatment for cancer in 2017, compared to 33 days at Salford Royal Hospital and 37 days at the Bolton Foundation Trust. So why the difference?
So the 62-day target is for urgent cancers, and it's a national target that needs to be delivered. We do very well against this target. For the last few years, we've been one of the few trusts in the Northwest and the only trust in Lancashire and Cumbria who actually deliver against that 62-day target. So, we're working harder. We want to bring it down. We're putting more diagnostic equipment in place. We're trying to improve our staffing levels. But actually, it's a target that we do very well against. And if you compare our performance to, let's say, figures in the rest of Lancashire, in the Northwest and nationally, we actually do very, very well against this target.
Is there any truth to reports that East Lancashire Hospitals is planning to spend almost £20 million more than it gets in revenue funding by the end of the financial year? So apparently, according to board papers or some reports, East Lancashire Hospitals NH Trust bosses have said that they're anticipating a revenue plan deficit of £19.1 million by the end of 2018-19, compared to 12 million in 2017-18. And despite this, the board's approved an ambitious spending plan. What's going on?
So again, without getting too technical, we do well against our financial control totals and our financial targets. For the last few years, we've always hit our targets, and our plan is that we need to hit it this year. But what this 19 million is referring to is we have an efficiency savings that we've got to deliver. And that's around about 4% of our budget, which is around about the 19 million. So if we spend as we plan to do to deliver the right level of care, we deliver our savings of 19 million, we will hit all our financial obligations as an organisation. And because we've been able to hit our financial obligations and we're planning to do so again, it does mean that we can invest. So if you think of some of the capital investment that's been going on in Pennine, Lancashire over the last few years, it's because we've done so well with our finances. So we've opened the elective centre on the Burnley site. We're just doing the new phase development of outpatients, ophthalmology, new theatres on the Burnley site. We've invested significantly on the Blackburn site, and we're just increasing capacity in A&E with the new £1 million development. And over the next couple of years, we're going to be spending £10 million on the front door of A&E on the Blackburn site. So because we manage our finances so well, we are able to invest in growing our state, improving our services. But it clearly is tight. It's always very tight. And this year will be no different. So we have to deliver efficiency savings of 4%. That is around about 19 million, and that will be a big ask for us.
Almost 1 in 5 A&E patients at the Royal Blackburn Teaching Hospital failed to be seen within 4 hours over the past year. Just 83.7% of patients who attended A&E in 2017-18 were seen within the target 4-hour period. Now that figure falls below the national target of 95% and emerged in a report by the East Lancashire Clinical Commissioning Group. My question is it time to scrap the 4-hour target in favour of something more achievable? Mr McGee, between April 2017 and March 2018, it's reported that 82 patients in East Lancashire had to wait over 12 hours in a trolley on the corridors of your Royal Blackburn Hospital. Now, does the Trust think that this is an acceptable service for patients? Because obviously patients don't.
So a few points there, if I may. The first thing about the 12-hour wait, it's totally unacceptable. And I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want it with my family. I wouldn't want it for any of our communities. Of those 82 patients, the vast majority, I think all but 4, were for patients who have been diagnosed with a mental illness and were waiting for a mental health bed. And we know there's been severe pressure on mental health inpatient capacity, both within Lancashire and nationally. So there were not patients who were waiting for a bed in Blackburn or Burnley. They were waiting to go elsewhere for a mental health inpatient facility, and they were managed and treated within A&E until a bed could be found available. And sometimes that was, those beds could be quite a long way away. So I apologise, but I do need to put it in context. The other thing about context is that it's been a really, really difficult winter for the NHS, and the vast majority of trusts didn't deliver against their 95% target. Having said that, I still think it's a valid target. I do think it reflects quality, and you wouldn't want to be sitting in an A&E department for longer than you need to. So I think that's really, really important. But I think there needs to be more balanced measures. So the A&E 95% target, it's become a binary measure. It's the only measure that you're measured against now. And I think there are other quality indicators that can measure patient experience, patient quality in A&E. And I think we need to get a more balanced set of metrics now that we're working through. And there is some hope with that, working with national regulators. They are looking at a balanced set of indicators for A&E. But I don't suspect the 95% target will ever go away. And actually, I don't think it ever should.
But it's not, it's not a question of sort of changing the goalposts all the time so that you can achieve this target. I think that genuinely those targets have become a little bit unrealistic in the fact that, the NHS is a different place from when those targets were set.
I mean, that's right, but there's also more that we can do. So as a system, we're working very hard. So when patients wait in A&E, it's normally a consequence of 2 things. Firstly, it's because the A&E department itself is overcrowded, so they're waiting to get an assessment. So we need to work on that and make sure we've got physically a bigger facility, and if we can, put more doctors and nurses in. And the other reason patients are waiting is once they've been assessed, if they then need a bed, particularly in winter, if we've not got a bed available, they can wait longer than the 4 hours. And so we're doing a lot of work in terms of with our social service colleagues, etc., so that we can get patients home quicker and more appropriate, therefore getting more bed capacity and allowing people to move out of A&E into our beds. So there's a lot that we can do together, a lot that we can do as a system. I'm hopeful that we will crack this one over the coming months and we'll get a much better A&E performance going into next winter. But actually, I know a lot of people don't like it, but I think it's actually an important target.
Obviously, your surgeons and other frontline NHS staff are working tirelessly to provide the best care possible to patients, but These figures perhaps might be further evidence, if it was needed, that short-term measures, perhaps like cancelling elective or planned surgery, are not sufficient or insufficient to meet NHS targets. Could you tell us at the moment whether you have a full complement of qualified A&E staff?
We do have some vacancies in A&E for our most senior grade consultants, and there's a national shortage of A&E consultants. But for the first time ever, or since I've been in post anyway, for the last 4 years, we've got a full complement now of middle grade doctors. We've got we're doing really well in terms of our nurse recruitment, and don't have many nursing vacancies now in A&E. But we're also putting other staff in there, so we're putting the likes of physiotherapists, occupational therapists, social care workers, other grades of staff into A&E to manage patients and to manage patients' flow. So we do have some vacancies at the very senior grade for consultants, and we are continually looking to recruit additional consultants. But there's a national shortage, so it's a very competitive market, and we have to compete against hospitals up and down the country.
And of course, you're all fishing from the same pond.
Of course, and that pond is for A&E consultants themselves is very limited. But we're having some success in terms of recruitment. As I said, for the first time since I've been in post, we've now got a complete full tier of middle grade doctors.
Could you tell us perhaps what your agency spend is for the current financial year?
So I haven't got the exact figure to hand, but we do spend quite a lot of money, more money than I would like, on agency staff. Because if it's a choice between paying for an agency staff or not having doctors or nurses on our wards, in our departments, in our A&E, I will always make the choice to have the staff in, as opposed to worrying about the costs. But it does cost us more to have agency doctors and nurses, and so what's really important is our reputation. I think the better reputation an organisation has, the more it can attract staff. So we're doing a lot in terms of our reputation, we're doing a lot in terms of education and training, we're doing a lot in terms of staff welfare and support, so we can attract the best and the brightest doctors, nurses, physiotherapists for the future. Because our communities deserve that, and I would rather have them working within Pennine Lancs than in London or Manchester or elsewhere.
The government a few years ago set a cap on agency staff. Have those caps been released? Are they still in force?
They are still in force, and every year they get tighter. So we've got to spend approximately 2 million less on agency staffing this year than we did last year, and we can only pay up to a certain amount for agency staffing, and I have to authorise and sign off all agency spend over a certain level. So those restrictions are getting tighter. They are becoming more restrictive, and hence the need to employ our own staff and to grow our own staff.
And I think it would be fair for me to say that a lot of the newspaper reports are fuelled by the fact that the newspapers are reporting that agency staff get paid a significant amount per hour, when that actually technically isn't true, because that amount goes to the agency rather than the agency staff.
Well, clearly the agency will take a cut of anything that we pay. I don't know. I mean, that's clearly commercial in confidence with the agency, so I don't know what the figures are and what cut they take, but clearly they will take a cut.
On Sunday the 17th of June, despite a massive public outcry, the East Lancashire Clinical Commissioning Group decided to finally close the walk-in centre at your Accrington Victoria Community Hospital. Has this caused additional pressure on your services, such as A&E? We're only a week in, so it's probably difficult to tell.
It is difficult to tell. We are monitoring it very, very carefully, and I think we'll probably need to leave it a month, probably 2 months, before we can see what patient movement is like. So we've got the figures from before. We'll have the figures afterwards, and we need to do a compare and contrast and see if there's been any significant change. The very early indications, as I said, it's only been a week. The very early indications is that there's not really been an impact, but, and this is a big but, we need to leave it a bit longer just so we can monitor that.
And of course, the outpatient services are still running from Accrington Victoria Hospital, as is the minor injuries unit that you provide.
No, that's right. The only bit of the service from Accrington Victoria that closed was the HAC, the Health Access Centre, the GP walk-in centre. Every other facility on the Accrington site is unaffected.
Another week, and sadly, another NHS scandal hits the headlines. Mr McGee, how confident are you that what happened at Gosport War Memorial Hospital, where drugs were allegedly given to patients who didn't need them, could ever happen at one of your hospitals? And could you perhaps tell us when roughly syringe drivers were removed from use at East Lancs Hospital Trust?
We have very tight processes and procedures in terms of drugs and administration of drugs on all our wards and departments, and professionals, doctors and nurses are continually reviewed, pharmacists are continually reviewed in terms of the use of drugs and how they administer drugs to patients. So, we have very, very tight procedures, and I can absolutely reassure patients in our communities of that. I can't give you an exact date in terms of the syringe drivers, and I can come back to that and I can give you that information. But what I can assure you is that, drugs and the administration of drugs and the use of drugs are really tightly controlled, not just within this hospital now, but within the NHS generally, but particularly within our hospitals. We're really careful, and there's an awful lot of training that goes on. And I have to say we have an excellent pharmacy service and drugs control service.
I'm obviously not a clinician, but I would assume, would it be fair to say that things have been a lot tighter since the travesty, which was the Shipman scandal? I assume that things are a lot tighter since that time anyway.
I mean, things are tight, and there's some very, very tight protocols around use of drugs, controlled drugs, issuing of drugs, how drugs and where drugs are controlled, which staff have to be trained, and the level of training to administer drugs. So it is a very, very regulated area, and it's something that we always have to be vigilant on and always have to continually look and see how we can improve things. But we are very tight.
This year sees the National Health Service, the NHS, celebrate its 70th birthday. In the 1960s, we saw a huge programme of hospital building, creating the network of district general hospitals, and in fact the Blair government, which struck deals with the PFI sector, renovated some of those sites to build new ones. But there is now an undoubted shift away from hospital care. Everyone is agreed that the time has come to move care out of hospitals and into the community. Is it cheaper and often better for the patient? Older people are particularly at risk of losing their independence the longer they spend in hospital. And of course, it doesn't take long for a person to become institutionalised whilst in hospital. We've seen a number of initiatives, such as the NPJ paralysis, to try and counter that. But over the past 20 years, the number of hospital beds has shrunk by a third. Mr McGee, how confident are you that the NHS will be here to celebrate its 100th, 90th or perhaps even its 80th birthday? And do you have the resources to provide the level of care that's going to be needed by those in the community?
So I'm very hopeful that the NHS will be here in another 30 years' time to celebrate its 100th birthday. I think the NHS, we should be rightly proud of it, and it's something that this country is known all over the world for. So, yeah, absolutely, I think it will be here in 30 years' time. Have we got the right level of resources? Well, of course, we can always do more, and somebody in my shoes will always ask for more resources. But we are going to get more resources as a consequence of the announcement that were made last week on the 70th birthday of the NHS. We need to use that money wisely. We need to invest it in frontline staff and services. It's really, really important that we talk the NHS up. Yes, there are instances where we don't get the services right. There are always things that we can do better. But if I needed hospital care, particularly if I needed emergency hospital care, I wouldn't want to be treated anywhere in the world other than in the UK in the NHS. That's how much confidence I have in the service.
We talked about resources in the community, and of course we live in an area where there is much deprivation and an aged population, many of whom who have multiple long-term health conditions. What is the Trust doing now to prepare for the expected rise in the number of patients who present in the community with complex needs?
We're working very closely with partners to try and develop this concept called integrated care, where we link up social services, community services, primary care, with housing, with education, and we try and keep people healthier within their own home settings, within their own communities for longer, so that they don't need secondary care. And that we need to change the paradigm really over the last 70 years we have been a sickness service. Now we need to become much more of a health promoting service, keeping people away from hospital, keeping them fit and healthy in their own homes. Then only when they absolutely need hospitals and secondary care should they come into hospital, and then they should have the best possible care that they can get. So as I say, we are working very closely with prevention, with local government colleagues, with the likes of education and housing and employment to keep people fit and healthy. And the biggest and one of the biggest impacts that we have on people's health is actually we offer good employment. And we know, people who are in good housing, have good employment, are part of a community setting, will stay fitter and healthier for longer. And that's what we're trying to promote.
I'd like to move on now, if I could, to emergency readmissions. And this is where patients are readmitted to hospital in an emergency within 30 days of discharge. And this is frequently used as a measure of the quality of care provided by a healthcare system. They're also used as an indicator for when poor patient outcomes could potentially have been avoided. Could you perhaps share with us the figures, and I'm putting you on the spot, I know, for emergency readmissions over the last 3 months?
I haven't got those figures to hand, Russ, but I can certainly get you those figures. They're something that we monitor quite closely, and we collect that information. I have to say we're not an outlier in terms of readmissions. Our services are normally very good, and we're very careful about how we discharge people and where we discharge people to. So we're not an outlier in terms of readmission rate, but certainly I can get you those figures.
So, some good news to share. The Care Quality Commission have recently released details of their adult inpatient survey, which rates the overall experience of care at East Lancashire Hospitals Trust as 8 out of 10. East Lancashire Hospitals, which was rated the #1 trust for patients receiving support from health and social care professionals at the time of discharge, also scored highly in a number of areas. I'll go on to read those areas. 96%, because I know that you'll be very pleased about these figures, Mr McGee. 96% said that the hospital rooms or wards were very or fairly clean. 96% of patients said that they always had enough to drink. 92% of patients said that they always had enough privacy when being examined or treated. 84% of inpatients rated their care as 7 or more out of 10, and 83% felt that they were always treated with respect and dignity. As Chief Executive of this Trust, that must give you a real feeling of achievement.
It does, because we're really important to our communities, and it's really important that we recognise that and we support our communities and our patients. And so that feedback is absolutely vital to us.